Everyone kept asking who the woman in the red dress was. Some whispered it. Others pointed. One guy in a corduroy blazer even stopped chewing his shrimp cocktail to say, "Is that Laura Dane?" Like he'd seen a ghost. And yeah, she looked unreal. Like someone who had never once cried in a bathroom stall, or yelled at a Wi-Fi router, or left a cup of yogurt to rot behind the TV. People stared at her, then at me, then back at her. And they all had the same expression, confusion. Because no one could figure out why she was with me. I didn't belong there. Everyone in that gym had some shared memory of streaking across the football field, getting suspended for graffiti, or drunkenly carving initials into the old oak tree outside the cafeteria. I didn't. I was the plus one who didn't get the inside jokes or the handshake code, or why everyone kept calling one guy Clipboard Steve when his name was definitely Mitch. But the woman in the red dress, she fit here. Like she'd been preserved in glass since high school and just now stepped out. She floated between groups of people like glitter in water, hugging old friends, laughing in a register I hadn't heard in years. And me? I trailed behind her, hands in my pockets, like a museum volunteer trying to keep guests from touching the artwork. Then he walked in. I didn't know his name yet, but the second her back straightened, I knew what he meant. She hadn't looked at me like that in months. Maybe years. I didn't even know her face could still move that way. Bright, soft, electric. She dropped her wine glass. Didn't notice. She walked toward him, smiling. Didn't look back. And when she reached him, tall, stubbled, tan like he just came from somewhere with sand, she embraced him like she was returning to oxygen after years underwater. Right in front of me. I didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Just stood there like background noise. A man-shaped blur in her periphery. And then it happened. Elora gasped. Her hand gripped his shoulder. Her eyes fluttered. And then she collapsed. Hard. Right onto the polished gym floor, arms twitching, wine staining the hem of that red dress like blood in the water. The man she'd embraced stumbled backward. People screamed. Someone shouted her name. I couldn't tell if it was me or someone else. The woman in the red dress was my wife. And as I ran toward her, I had one terrifying thought I couldn't shake. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes after Elora collapsed. By that time, the crowd had already formed a full circle around her. People were speculating, heat stroke, panic attack, low blood sugar, like it was some kind of trivia contest. I heard one woman near the punch bowl mutter, "Did you see how hard she was breathing before she hugged him?" Like it was a clue in a true crime podcast. But no one offered real help. They just gawked. I was on my knees beside her, feeling more useless than I've ever felt. Her head lolled slightly toward me, eyelids twitching. I whispered her name over and over again. I even tried to pull a joke. "You always know how to make an entrance, huh?" But it caught in my throat like gravel. This wasn't a dramatic faint. This wasn't movie scene romantic. This was terrifying. The guy she hugged? Gone. I looked around but didn't see him. He literally vanished. And while everyone focused on the woman lying unconscious in a crimson puddle of Pinot Noir, he must have slipped out like it wasn't his scene anymore. It wasn't until we got to the hospital that I noticed something that made my skin crawl. They wheeled her into a private room for observation. She was stable but still unconscious. A nurse told me to wait outside while they checked her vitals and did some blood work. I sat in one of those fake leather chairs, staring at the no smoking sign across from me, wondering what kind of person smokes in a hospital hallway in 2025. Then the door opened. A nurse came out and said, "You can sit beside her if you like. She's resting, but she might wake soon." I stood up, walked in, and as I leaned over to sit beside the bed, I caught a scent. Not her perfume, not hand sanitizer or hospital bleach. It was musky, sweet, something foreign, like tobacco and citrus and regret. I'd never smelled it before. So I leaned closer, gently, stupidly, and sniffed her hair. That scent was not mine. It wasn't her usual lavender shampoo. It wasn't from our house. It was his. She was still wearing his cologne. I jerked back like I'd been burned. My chair scraped the floor, and the sound made a nurse poke her head in. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded like a liar. Just startled myself. "Sorry." She smiled politely and left. I turned back to Elora and just stared. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence. That she hugged a lot of people tonight, and maybe this guy wore an aggressive fragrance. But I remembered the way she melted into him. The way her lips had parted. The way she hadn't even introduced me. She was still wearing the cologne of another man, and she collapsed in my arms like I was the one who hurt her. I looked down at her pale fingers. The ring I gave her, a modest silver band with a sapphire, because diamonds weren't in the budget back then, was still on her hand. She hadn't taken it off. But I couldn't help wondering, for how long had she wanted to? The worst part? I still felt guilty. Guilty for being suspicious. For not saying anything when she started acting strange weeks ago. For being boring. Predictable. Easy to ignore. Maybe she needed more than I could give her. Maybe she deserved someone like him. Someone taller. Someone shinier. I sat in silence for an hour. When she finally stirred, her lips barely moved. What happened? I didn't speak right away. I just watched her. Her eyes flickered, and she tried to sit up, but I placed a hand on her shoulder and gently pushed her back. You fainted, I said. She blinked. At the reunion? Yeah, right after you hugged someone. Her eyes shifted fast. She turned away from me. I don't remember. She said it like a defense. But it sounded like a lie. 3 days after the reunion, Alora was back home and walking around like nothing had happened. She brushed the whole thing off with clinical detachment, saying it was probably dehydration or her electrolytes being out of whack. She even joked about how dramatic it must have looked. Honestly, she said while scooping yogurt into a bowl, like we weren't standing in the crater of a marriage-sized meteor. Collapsing at my own reunion? What am I, a Victorian damsel? I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just came out. Because the alternative was asking her the question that had been clawing at my throat since the hospital. Who was that man? But I didn't have to ask. Because that night, when she was asleep beside me, I unlocked her phone. I know how that sounds. But something in me had snapped. Something small and stupid and soft inside my chest that had always believed her, always forgiven her silences, had finally peeled away. So I waited until I heard her breathing slow, and I picked up her phone from the nightstand, tilted it to her face, and let the camera unlock it. It worked. Her recent messages were clean. Too clean. Not a single thread before 2 days ago. She'd deleted everything. But she forgot one thing. Her notes app. And inside it, there was one entry. No title, just a short, scribbled list. Hotel keys, double-check dates. Grant's coffee order, black with sugar. Talk to Parker if necessary. Remember the story, HR conference in Philly. My stomach flipped. Grant. I hadn't heard that name once. Not at the reunion, not since. But I remembered something strange. At the hospital, one of the nurses asked her, "Is there anyone you'd like us to call?" And I swear, before she said my husband, she hesitated. Just for a beat. It wasn't long. But now I knew why. I closed the phone. I put it back exactly where it had been. And I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing I wouldn't sleep. The next morning, I tried to bring it up. Gently. You ever been to Philly for work? I asked while pouring coffee. She blinked, just once. Philly? No. Why? Just wondering. Didn't you have some HR conference last year? She didn't answer right away. Oh, yeah, but that was online. We zoomed in. Lie. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded like it made sense. I kept my voice even. Do you know anyone named Grant? She froze. Barely. If I hadn't been watching her hand pour oat milk into her cereal, I might have missed the tremor. Grant, she said, playing dumb. That's a pretty generic name. Another lie. I wanted to push further. Pin her down with questions. But I didn't. I just made a quiet note in my head. She's building a version of reality where this man doesn't exist. And that version, conveniently, erases every part of me that would question her. So I started building one of my own. That afternoon, I messaged her former coworker, Rachel, a woman she never liked but always claimed was too gossipy for her own good. Rachel responded in 2 minutes. Oh, you mean Grant Morris? LOL. That dude. Thought she dumped him years ago. My throat closed. Wait, dumped? Didn't know you two were talking again, Rachel wrote. Wasn't my business, but they used to be close. Not just coworkers, if you get what I mean. I did. I asked Rachel when they'd last worked together. She replied, he left the company 2 years ago. He moved to Seattle, but he came back recently. Transferred back in June. Alora started jogging in June. She started the glow up in June. She added the BH15 Blue Heart Fire countdown to her phone in June. Everything began in June. I sat on the couch in our too quiet living room, hearing her in the other room humming a happy tune, like we were just another couple on just another Sunday. But something in me had cracked open. She had erased him from her phone, but not from her habits, not from her scent, not from that moment in the gym where she folded into his arms like I was nothing more than a polite inconvenience she'd brought along to make the story more palatable. And now she wanted me to play dumb. But I wasn't going to. Not anymore. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just adjusted. Quietly. Carefully. Because Alora had already decided the version of me she wanted, docile, distracted, uninvolved, and I figured that was the perfect cover. So I leaned into it. Let her think I was fading back into my usual softness. Meanwhile, I was planning. The first thing I did was buy a second phone. Cheap one. Paid in cash. I registered it under a fake name and installed a burner texting app. Then, one evening while she was soaking in the tub, hair pinned up, legs resting on the side like she was posing for an oil painting, I grabbed her phone again. This time I went into her email. And there it was. Not a full thread. No, she was smarter than that. But a confirmation email from a boutique hotel downtown. A suite reservation. 2 weeks from now. Under her name. Booked for a quarterly recruiting seminar. Except her company wasn't holding any seminar. I knew because I called her HR department and pretended to be interested in employment. The woman I spoke to said, "Oh, we don't do in-person events anymore. Everything's virtual these days. Cheaper." So I had her, but I didn't want to blow it. Instead, I sent a message from the burner. "We need to talk. In person. Same suite, same night. I'll be there by 8. I signed it. Gee, I wasn't sure she'd fall for it. But when I watched her open her phone the next morning, I saw her expression change. Not fear, not guilt, but something even worse, anticipation. She tapped the message, read it twice, then smiled to herself as she locked her phone and walked past me like I was a houseplant. For the next several days, she was glowing, floating, acting like she was already halfway to somewhere warmer. She started humming again, that same tune I now realized wasn't hers. I caught her watching the clock, checking her phone under the table, even shaving her legs midweek, which she never used to do unless we had dinner plans. We didn't. The night of the seminar, I pretended to be sick. Told her I'd eaten something weird from the corner deli and wasn't feeling great. She looked concerned, but not enough to cancel. She left me some ginger tea on the counter and said, "I'll call you when I get there." I watched her from the window as she got in the Uber. Then I drove straight to the hotel. I got there early, too early, probably, and tipped the night receptionist to give me a spare key. He said, "Sir, I'm not supposed to," and I quietly slid a crisp 100 across the counter. He looked at it, looked at me, and said, "Room 817. When I entered the suite, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the armchair by the corner window, facing the city, and I waited. At 7:52 p.m., the door clicked open. I didn't move. She stepped inside. I could hear the hush of her heels on the carpet, the faint sound of perfume being spritzed, a zipper being checked. Then she gasped. I didn't know what I expected. Shock, guilt, a scream? What I got was worse. She laughed. "Oh," she said, voice steady. "It's you." I turned. Slowly. Her red dress, the same one from the reunion, hung from her like a rehearsed lie. Expecting someone else? I asked, not bothering to hide the bitterness. She didn't even flinch. Honestly, no. But I figured something like this might happen. Eventually. Eventually, I stood. "Alora, what the hell is going on?" She crossed her arms. "Do you want the version that makes you feel better, or the version that's true?" I blinked. "Try the truth." She tilted her head, like a teacher about to explain a basic math concept to a failing student. "You were never supposed to come to the reunion, Parker. You weren't even on the RSVP. I added you last minute out of guilt. Grant and I had planned that night for weeks." Every syllable felt like a slow nail against my spine. "You planned to collapse?" She rolled her eyes. "No, that part wasn't planned. I hadn't eaten. I was nervous. I took something, just a supplement, but I guess it hit me wrong. I didn't fake it, if that's what you're asking." "And the hug? The deleted texts? The hotel room?" Now she hesitated. "Grant was something I never really let go of," she said quietly. "We started talking again. That's all. At first. You know how it goes. People reconnect. You forget why it ended. You romanticize. And now?" I asked, voice brittle. She shrugged. "He ghosted me after the reunion. Won't return my calls. Probably spooked after the whole drama. You got what you wanted. He's out of the picture." I stepped forward. I didn't do any of this for him. I did it for me. Because I'm tired of feeling like a placeholder in my own marriage. Her face softened for a moment. Just a flicker. Then maybe, she said, almost kindly, we're both tired. I nodded. And then I left. But not before placing a manila envelope on the hotel nightstand. Copies of her texts, screenshots of her reservation, Rachel's message thread. She didn't open it right away. But she would. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed should have felt like freedom. I expected silence. Distance. A clean emotional exit. Instead, the house we shared became something else entirely. A haunted museum of routines we no longer honored. Alora didn't move out. She didn't beg either. She just existed in the same rooms as me, like a quiet, well-dressed ghost. We didn't sleep in the same bed anymore. She claimed she didn't want to make things awkward, but there wasn't enough space in this world to make what we were living anything but awkward. She took the guest room. I stayed in the master. Sometimes I could hear her crying behind the door. Other nights, I heard nothing, and that somehow felt worse. I didn't ask questions. I didn't poke the wound. She never opened the envelope I left on the hotel nightstand. At least, not in front of me. But I did notice one thing. The perfume changed. Gone was the intoxicating, spicy scent that lingered after her supposed business meetings. Now it was something lighter. Floral. Almost sad. One afternoon, about a week after our confrontation, I came home from work early. I don't even know why. I had a client cancel last minute, and instead of grabbing a coffee or walking around aimlessly to kill time, I drove straight home. When I walked in, she wasn't in the kitchen or living room. Her purse was there, though. So was her phone, sitting face up on the counter. That's what did it. That's what gave me the final piece. Because I never, not once in our entire marriage, saw her leave her phone unlocked and unattended. I hesitated for only a second, then tapped the screen. There was one missed call from a number with no name attached. The voicemail icon blinked once. New message. I know what you're thinking. No, I didn't hesitate. I pressed play. The voice that came through wasn't male. It was a woman. Soft-spoken. Older. Maybe late 50s. Her voice had that kind of clarity you only get from someone who's used to not repeating herself. Alora, I thought you said you told him that it was over. But if he showed up to the hotel, you obviously didn't follow through. We agreed, no more secrets. Not if you want to move forward with any of this. I warned you what would happen if you found out the wrong way. Call me back. And next time, don't be so careless. I just stood there, the message looping in my head. It wasn't Grant. It wasn't about him. This was someone else entirely. Someone Alora had made other promises to. Promises that, apparently, involved me being kept in the dark. I scrolled through the voicemail metadata. It had been left 3 hours ago, and the call had come from an area code I recognized, not locally, but 2 states over. North Carolina. I took a picture of the screen. I didn't delete the voicemail. I didn't say a word. Instead, I walked back out to the car and drove for almost 2 hours with no destination in mind. The idea that she had another life, beyond Grant, felt like someone dropped a floor beneath the one I was already falling through. I replayed the message in my head the entire drive. We agreed, no more secrets. That wasn't the voice of a friend. That was the voice of a partner, a handler, maybe even a gatekeeper to something deeper, more permanent than a fling or affair. What exactly had Alora entangled herself in? And more importantly, why did she lie to both of us? When I returned home late that night, the lights were off. The house was still. I walked past the guest room door without stopping and went straight to the master bedroom. But just before I shut the door behind me, I noticed something new. A white envelope. On my pillow. It was unsealed. Inside, one photograph. A grainy image. Looked like it was taken through a windshield, at night, from a car parked across the street. It showed Alora, and she wasn't with Grant. She was standing beside a woman in a long beige trench coat. A woman I didn't recognize. But something about her stance, her expression, the way she held Alora's arm like she owned it. That's when I realized. I wasn't dealing with a love triangle. This was something else. Something much, much worse. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the edge of the bed with the photograph in my hands. The ceiling fan ticking softly above me like a metronome, counting down something I hadn't yet named. I must have stared at that photo 100 times, flipping it over just to see the blank back, as if some explanation would materialize out of the white silence. The woman with Alora wasn't young. Not old either, but older than Alora. Her face was shadowed, but her posture was unmistakably confident. Not romantic. Not warm. It was possessive, managerial. She wasn't someone Alora was hiding because of desire. She was someone Alora feared. The next morning, I didn't confront her. I made coffee like nothing had happened and left early. I told her I had a consult with a commercial client across town. She mumbled something about a webinar and barely looked up from her phone. She didn't know I was going to North Carolina. The phone number from the voicemail had an area code registered to Asheville. I didn't know anyone there. Alora never mentioned it, never vacationed there, and as far as I knew, her company had no connections to that area. But I knew someone who might help. My brother-in-law, Lewis, worked in municipal records for Buncombe County. We hadn't spoken in months, not since he told me at Christmas that Alora seemed too polished lately, and I got defensive. He didn't gloat when I called. He just said, "Took you long enough." Lewis ran the number through a county database. "It's a landline," he said, "registered to a nonprofit, some kind of women's housing org." That made my stomach turn. "Like a shelter?" I asked. "No," he said. "Not exactly. It's private, real closed off. They don't even list the address on their website, which barely works, by the way. But I found something weird, a permit request from last year. Security fence install. Floodlights. Cameras." My blood ran cold. What kind of nonprofit needs floodlights and surveillance? He paused. "The kind that doesn't want anyone watching them." I asked for the name. He gave it to me. Clarity House. That was it. No surname, no initials, just Clarity House. I Googled it later in my car at a rest stop and found an almost empty site with a one-paragraph mission statement about rebuilding autonomy and freedom in a controlled environment. It didn't sound like a rehab or a shelter. It sounded like a cult pretending to be a clinic, and Alora was tied to it. On the drive back, my thoughts spiraled through timelines and excuses I'd ignored. Her sudden personality shifts. The trip to Philly that never happened. Her wardrobe changes, the countdown in her phone, the voicemail from the strange woman. And now, this photograph of her standing like a schoolgirl beside someone who radiated control. This wasn't about infidelity anymore. This was about involvement. Alora hadn't just reconnected with someone. She had joined something, and she was keeping it quiet. The moment I stepped back into the house, I could tell something was off. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her phone wasn't charging in its usual place. I called out, but she didn't answer. I found her in the backyard, sitting on the patio chair, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket like a patient. She was holding something in her lap, the manila envelope I'd left at the hotel. The photos, the screenshots, Rachel's messages, all of it. She looked up at me like she had been waiting for hours. "I thought you'd ask sooner," she said quietly. "Ask what?" I said, voice dry. "About Clarity House." She said it like it wasn't terrifying, like it was a footnote, like she wasn't about to rewrite the entire history of our marriage in one sentence. "Is that where you've been going?" I asked. "Is that who the woman on the voicemail is?" Alora nodded. Then her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks. Not guilt. Not even sorrow. Shame. "I didn't cheat on you," she said. "Not in the way you think. But I did leave you behind a long time ago. I just didn't know how to say it." I sat down across from her. "Then say it now." She pulled the blanket tighter around her and stared at the grass like it might offer her answers. 3 years ago, I was recruited. Quietly. They don't advertise. They don't need to. They look for people with friction in their lives. Women on the edge of walking away from everything. Relationships. Jobs. Families. They tell you there's another path. One where you don't have to explain yourself anymore. Where you don't owe anyone softness. I swallowed. "So what? You joined a philosophy club?" She laughed hollow. "No, I didn't join. I trained. There's a difference." I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't like how she said it. Alora leaned forward, her eyes hard now. "They're building something, Parker. Not a cult. Not religion. Something cleaner. Something more permanent. They said love is just another system of surveillance. They said marriage was a game of emotional blackmail, disguised as partnership." "And you believe them?" Her face twisted. I wanted to. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because suddenly, none of this was about Grant. He was a distraction, a narrative she dangled in front of me while she slipped deeper into something else. Something organized. Something institutional. Something that maybe wasn't letting her leave, even if she wanted to. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Why tell me this?" Alora looked down. And then she said something that genuinely rattled me. Because I missed the last check-in. And they don't like loose ends. We sat in silence after she said it. The phrase hung between us like a fog neither of us wanted to breathe in. They don't like loose ends. It was such a perfectly vague threat, it almost didn't feel real. But the way she said it, like she was already bracing for something, told me it was. I asked her what that meant exactly. What they would do if she missed a check-in. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up slowly, pulled the blanket tighter around her, and went back inside without another word. Like she'd given me all I was allowed to know. The house felt like a different place after that. Like it belonged to someone else. I moved through it like a tenant waiting for eviction. I checked the locks twice. I turned off my phone. I kept the photo of the woman in the trench coat hidden inside my sock drawer. That night, Elora didn't come out of her room. I sat awake, fully dressed, phone in hand, scrolling through forums I'd never imagined I'd end up in, message boards about controlling organizations, soft cults, exit counselors. I found posts from people who spoke in code, describing places that reprogram women to disconnect from domestic thought patterns. Most of them were anonymous. Some deleted their accounts shortly after posting. At around 2:12 a.m., I heard it. A knock. Not at the door. At the window. My office window. Ground floor. Side of the house. I froze. It came again. Not loud. Just enough. I stood, heart racing, stepped softly to the hallway, and peeked through the blinds. There was a car parked at the curb. Black. No plates on the front. The windows were too tinted to see inside. I crept back toward the office window, inching low so I wouldn't be seen. When I peeked out from behind the curtain, there was no one at the glass anymore. But something was there. A manila envelope. I stared at it for a full minute before unlocking the side door and stepping outside. The street was dead silent. The air was heavy, like just before a thunderstorm. The car was still there, idling. As I bent down and picked up the envelope, I heard the engine cut. And then it drove away. No screeching tires. No hurry. Just smooth, calculated distance. I didn't open the envelope outside. I waited until I was back in the house, door locked, blinds shut. I turned on just one lamp. Elora didn't come out. I wasn't even sure she was still home. Inside the envelope were two items. The first was a photograph. Of me. Not from tonight. From a few days ago. I was sitting in my car at the rest stop off I-40, the one I pulled into after visiting Asheville. The photo was taken from another vehicle, angled, distant, but undeniably me. Head in my hands, phone in my lap, clearly unraveling. The second item was a note. Typed. No signature. No letterhead. It read, "Observation is not permission. No third parties. You are violating the terms." That was it. No demand. No threat. Just that. Cold reminders that I had stepped outside my role, and that someone had seen it. I didn't sleep at all. By morning, Elora was already gone. No note. No text. Her shoes were missing, and the white trench coat she never wore was no longer in the closet. Her phone was still on the charger. But her wedding ring had been left on the kitchen counter, placed carefully next to a folded receipt from a rental car company. Drop-off location, Asheville Regional Airport. She hadn't packed any bags. She wasn't running. She was returning. I stared at the ring until it stopped meaning anything. Then I called the rental agency pretending to be her assistant. They confirmed she'd picked up the vehicle that morning, but they didn't have a return time listed. Just a vague, multi-day business travel flag in their system. I hung up, and for the first time since this whole thing began, I felt something new. Not confusion. Not betrayal. Rage. Not at her. Not even at the woman in the photo. At myself. Because somehow, in trying to play the quiet, patient husband, I had allowed something horrifying to grow right under my roof. I had let it fester. I had watched her disappear in real time, and said nothing until it was too late. I was done watching. That evening, I packed a bag. No texts. No notes. I printed the photograph of her with the mystery woman. I printed the rental receipt. I printed the screenshot of the voicemail transcription. Then I booked a one-way ticket. I was going to Asheville, not to bring her home, not even to save her, but to finally meet the people who thought I didn't matter. I didn't tell anyone I was flying out. No calls to my brother-in-law, no updates to friends. I didn't even leave a key with a neighbor. I just locked the door behind me, tossed my bag in the back seat, and drove to the airport like a man chasing the last train out of a dream he didn't sign up for. I didn't sleep on the flight. Couldn't eat either. My mind was full of unfinished conversations. Things I should have said, moments I should have questioned. For a long time, I blamed Alora for all of it. The secrets, the distance, the manipulation. But somewhere over Tennessee, as the sky began to glow with early morning light, I started blaming myself too. I had let her vanish, piece by piece, without ever once reaching out to stop her. Not truly. I'd held the flashlight, but never stepped into the dark. When I landed, I rented a car and drove straight to the edge of Asheville. Clarity House didn't have a sign. No GPS pin. Just a vague address buried in a nonprofit permit that Lewis had found. I followed the mountain roads until the trees thickened and the air changed. Thinner, sharper, like it didn't want outsiders breathing it. The gate was closed. Tall metal. Security camera mounted high above it. I stopped the car about 30 yards away and walked the rest of the distance with nothing but the folder in my hands. I expected to be stopped. I expected someone to come out. Maybe the woman from the photo, or some kind of cold administrator in a pressed suit. But no one came. Not right away. Instead, after 15 silent minutes, the gate opened just enough for a single person to walk through. And there she was. Alora. No makeup. No red dress. No carefully crafted voice or glowing posture. Just her. In jeans. A plain jacket. Hair tied back. Her expression unreadable. I figured it would be you, she said quietly. I didn't know if it should be. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked past me, toward the trees, like she was listening for something else. Then she stepped closer. I left because I thought they had answers, she said. About identity. About purpose. About what I'm supposed to do with the parts of myself that didn't fit inside our marriage. And I asked. They don't. Her voice cracked just a little. They have routines, systems, control. And at first, that felt like relief. Because I didn't have to think. I didn't have to feel anything. Just obey. And that felt cleaner than love. I swallowed hard. But love's not clean. No, she said. It's messy and patient. And it doesn't always make you feel powerful. But it makes you real. I stepped closer. I thought I lost you. I whispered. She looked up at me. You didn't, she said. You just stopped asking where I went. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. I just nodded. Slowly. And handed her the folder. I brought these, I said. In case you forgot who you were pretending to be. She took it, glanced at the contents, then closed it gently. I'm not going back in, she said. But I can't go home either. Not yet. I need to undo what I signed up for. I need to walk out of this the long way. Not just sneak out and pretend I never knocked on the door. So what do we do? I asked. She looked at me. Really looked, for the first time in what felt like years. We start over, she said. Later. If you still want me, when I've found the parts one lost. I didn't press her. I didn't try to fix it. I just nodded. Then I left. Not because I gave up on her, but because I believed her this time. Over the next 6 months, we spoke once a week. Sometimes more. Always on her terms. She stayed in Asheville, but not with Clarity House. She cut contact, got a job in a small bookstore, started therapy with someone not chosen by them. And slowly, I saw her come back to life, like someone waking up from a long, controlled dream. One morning, she sent me a picture. It was of her hand, wearing the sapphire ring again. No caption, just the image. 3 weeks later, she came home. And this time, she knocked on the door. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to be let back in.